and then we'll get to the coding. So the main, as you know, the main sort of purpose of this paper is to address and explore and test maybe the belief or perpetuated myth, maybe even to some extent, that using students in business research is inappropriate. So the idea is, not the idea, the fact is that much of the research on business is done using student samples. So professors who study the different business topics have no access to real employees for whatever reason, but have easy access to the students in their courses. And so much of the research has been conducted using students as research subjects. And the concern obviously is that maybe the findings based on student samples do not generalize to the general population or to employees. Maybe whatever students say or do is different from what the real employees would say or do. And so as a result, many journals have this policy of not accepting papers based on student samples, specifically for the concern that it does not represent sort of the real world. There have been a lot of editorial letters and papers that talk about the issue. And so usually they would name concerns such as students are younger and maybe younger people behave differently than older people, or the incentives are not the same. So it's one thing when you do it as part of your job, and then a whole different thing when you do it just for free or for a small credit in your course. Or the conditions are different. So one thing when you're in a real office with real colleagues or coworkers, and it's a whole different thing when you have a simulation in the classroom, some sort of a game that presumably teaches us how people would behave or what kind of decisions they would make if they were top managers. And so some sort of responses to those letters or to those concerns have touched upon possible conditions when student samples may or may not be appropriate. So obviously, if we would like to study, for example, I don't know, some sort of political views, those tend to change with age. So like if you want to study if people, I don't know, how they look at some economic issues or political issues, maybe yes, maybe younger people have no experience and as a result would not be a suitable sample to study the general population's attitudes. But then on the other hand, if we are trying to study maybe, I don't know, the kinds of problems people experience when they work in teams. So it's very possible that, you know, students experience the same problems. So ultimately, we don't know. And much of the discussion, not much, all of the discussion on the topic has basically revolved around our sort of logical conclusions and beliefs, but not the actual, you know, empirical evidence. And so for those of you, I see we have a couple of new people, relatively new people on the team. I'll show you what we've done so far and then what needs to be done as the next step. So what we did was we wanted to look at how and when student samples have been used in international business research to begin with. And so what we did, we went to all major international business journals, and you see 9 of them here if you can see my screen. And so we looked for every single paper that mentioned the word student. And so we extracted those, and some of them, there were quite a few. Others, there were a lot, and others were very few. But so we downloaded, there were like 4,500 papers total that mentioned the word student. And so we checked each of those to see if they actually used student samples or if they simply mentioned student somewhere in the text. And so most of you have gone through many of those papers, so you remember the task. But you know, we did extract those papers that actually were based on student samples. And so here you see we have, for example, like 35, 38 papers from the Journal of International Business Studies that were based on students. If we go to the Journal of Cross-Cultural Psychology, there are a total of about 500 papers that used student samples. So this will allow us to talk about the use of student samples in general. So we will say that, for example, journal like Journal of Cross-Cultural Psychology, they were much more open to the possibility of using student samples and published 600 of them, whereas JIBS seems to have been very cautious and published only very few papers. And if you look at the years, many of them came from like much earlier decades. So we will provide that kind of outlook or review by journal and maybe by year. The next one, we would like to also review what kind of topics have been studied in those papers. Maybe journals published papers based on student samples that dealt with maybe attitudes, but maybe not with compensation, for example, or maybe papers that dealt with teamwork, but maybe not with, I don't know, communication or whatever it might be, or motivation. And so we will provide that breakdown. And so now the task is to basically see what's in those papers and see if there are any systemic differences. We also extracted and found a bunch of meta-analytic papers. And this time we went through all of the journals, not just International Business. And so we looked at all meta-analytic papers and specifically hunted for the ones that compared the results of whatever they studied in student versus non-student samples. And so as you can see here, we look like, again, Journal for Social Psychology. So there is one paper that evidently did compare specifically students to non-students. And if I can find quickly that just as an example. This one apparently has been approved. And so there was something related. In fact, we even have the word student in the title. So it was clearly based on students. But then we have also a few papers from this journal. So 2 that did not qualify. And then we have some that we need to take a closer look, and I don't remember what the coding means. We also had some that specifically said we excluded from our analysis studies that were based on student samples. And that's an interesting bit of information. So we might want to mention in our review that not only some journals are sort of averse and try not to publish student-based papers, but even some meta-analytic reviews deliberately exclude those kinds of studies from research. So we have basically now gone through over 4,000 papers and classified them as exactly what we need, definitely something we don't need, and I think there are a few that still need another closer look. And so now the challenge is to go through each of those papers that met the initial screening criteria and record what's in them. And so I suggest that we skip or put off for now the meta-analytic papers. Those are fewer. Maybe I'll try to go through them. Pierce is here, maybe he can help with that because those are a little bit more complicated. But for the original papers, so we basically need to get some basic information about each of the papers. And so this is what I thought we would like to record, but now let's collectively, and especially Pierce, you've done it a lot. So let's see if we need anything else. So I thought we would record who is doing the coding, then journal, then paper, and paper ID. That's literally just the name of the paper in the database here. So we can just copy the whole thing and paste it there. Title, just in case, gives us a little bit information, seconds to copy, but gives us more information about the study. Year published, so that we can look at it by year. And that's where we get into the most interesting stuff at this time, which is the topic. And so I'm not sure how much information we want to record. So for the topic, we probably will want to go with some generic topics like, compensation or motivation or communication or whatever else normally is included in organizational behavior topics. But then I suggest we provide some sort of a more detailed description, maybe like 3, 4, 5 words. And it seems like it would be most important to show what correlates with what. The problem is that sometimes it's only 2 variables. Like if I open one, whichever one, like for example, this one here, sometimes it's very, very clear. Like looking at the title, oh, this one is not even, so that seems like it's editorial, so it wouldn't even qualify. So I'm not sure what it has a plus. Oh, it's plus, it's probably just an editorial on the issue of using students. But let me open one that is like a regular paper. So perceived career opportunities from globalization capabilities and attitudes towards women in Iran. So not entirely clear what is studied in the paper. So we would then go to the abstract. Let's take a closer look here. In competition for human capital incentives, understanding how employees perceive their fit in a company can assist companies in harnessing the knowledge and skills. Building on the personal organization fit, we suggest that individual employee perceptions of globalized work represent a fit between individual and company capabilities and values. We find both similarities and difference between the relationships. I still have no idea what exactly they studied. So let's go then to the tables and see what's in the tables. So they have sample here. So some of these will be very simple, like you will see right away something like age and motivation or something, or performance, but some would be much, much more complicated. And so here they're looking at company organization capability, intercultural cap, women's power, acceptance of women, so tricky, and then they have a bunch of other correlations. Now, the problem is I don't see where the students here, so it was classified as a plus, but was it a false positive? Because I don't really see anything related to students. And we will have a lot of false positives. You remember the mandate was if in doubt, include it, we will exclude it later. So there will be probably some, so let me look for student here to begin with. Maybe that's what I should have started with. An English questionnaire was admitted, so the sample was students, very good. So it was a student, so it was MBA students. Then yes, it looks to me that when we look at the actual result tables, it seems like it's some sort of attitudes towards
Females and organizational fit.
yeah, organizational fit probably would be the best word, right? And I wish we also had a correlation table. So in that case, we could extract many more correlations. So it seems like there is even no correlation at all here. So which will be very hard to deal with. But at least there is some sort of perception of organizational fit and something maybe related to gender roles. So we do have a little bit of stuff like, you know, I really like that they have job satisfaction, for example. We will find a lot of papers that looked at job satisfaction. And so this one was based on a student sample, so we can compare the averages to non-student samples. But the problem is that they didn't provide any correlations or anything like no bivariate statistics, unless I'm missing something here. Or, oh, no, they do have. Okay, that's wonderful. And so that's where I'm not sure how to approach it. So Pierce, you have more experience. Do we want to record everything from each paper? Or do we want to just get the general topic? Or do we want to, so the way I started doing that, I thought it would be what correlates with what, maybe like in your own language, your own words, but then the list of all of the variables included in the paper. But, and then we'll start seeing some trends and we can extract them. But should we worry about the hypothesized versus not hypothesized outcome variable? You know, just something that is in the correlation table versus what was in the hypothesis itself. And do we want to record all of these for now, or just the key variables? So that's where I'm not sure what's the best way.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
We have a paper, for example, underway about the 7 different measures of cultural values. And within it, we do a particular type of test, a measurement equivalent test, to kind of argue that undergraduates are equivalent to MBAs, which are equivalent to people with and without work experience, which is almost like this, right? It's different because we get individual participant data, so we can do it from, you know, the raw data. But basically, when they go through that, they look for 2 different types of things. One is weak equivalence, which is mostly going to focus on. Weak equivalence is having a similar correlation or factor structure. So the correlates are the same. So it's kind of like, you know, yeah, sure, you know, you can use employees, you can use students. Its correlates are not going to be at all hardly a difference. So in order to do that, we're going to need the correlates of students and the correlates of employees or a working sample. You know, just so then we can make a very, very basic and straightforward comparison. Then you have strong equivalence, and that's means and standard deviations. So, you know, though the correlations could be exactly the same, sometimes you get a difference in the means, and that doesn't affect the variances, not necessarily. So we'd kind of like to have both those types of information. Now, how we should gather it. I've been building a platform along these lines for about the last 6 years. You know, and put in a lot of resources and time into it. And it kind of allows us to tackle a topic of this size by doing things like putting all the PDFs in one place, associating them with elements, allowing us to have as many moderators as we want, allowing us to comment, pull down menus. I could show that a little bit to you, and we can decide whether that is a kind of a good way of kind of going forward. and it's free
Here's
and everyone have access.
Here's my only suggestion or concern here is that we might want to, or suggestion, I guess, it may be a good idea to do it in 2 stages, meaning that we first start with, I'm not sure if my screen is still showing, yeah. So that maybe in the first round, we only record the general themes and topics, and we go through the actual coding with the numbers only after we identify the papers that are sort of numerous enough to be meta-analyzed. Like, for example, if we eventually discover that this topic appears only in this paper, so we can't really do much with it other than just mention the topic. So therefore, we can just do a quick recording of the theme, but not get into all the numbers and all the proper, meta-analytic coding. Would that be a good idea, or is it easier just to go?
I mean, that's not a bad idea. I mean, what you get savings from there is that you don't have to put in the details of the measurement into the platform, right? Because you have to specify what you're looking at, what's the measurement. I could show it to you just for like 1 minute.
If you want to switch to your screen.
Yeah. Okay. So you got to go to security.
Oh yeah. I need to. Sorry, I didn't see what it was.
Yeah, I always forget.
Yeah, it should be open now.
So here is the platform. Man, you can get into it. There's videos and YouTube to kind of show you how to use it, whatever. And there's like dozens and dozens of different projects. This is page 1 of 6, right? And this is some of the ones. This is actually one we're actually, the first 2 we're actually doing with VAST, right? Uncultural change, free writing. This one's the one that's probably most advanced. So it kind of starts with a basic Prisma or standard meta-analytic search kind of diagram, which talks about how many articles you come into. It automatically deduplicates them. You can go through, then you go through title search, which is basically the kind of level, does it have the data you want or not? And then full text. And then finally you go into data entry. So, import articles here. And it says the date and the time and the percent new and whatever your search term was and when you did it. So if you want to do it again and update it, it's very, very easy. Then it goes into title screening. And you can add anything you want here to help you. If I wanted to add student, for example, right? It would be that, and it would highlight the terms if it kind of showed up, right? Your students showing up. And then people can say yes or no and the reason why. Then it goes into full text screening. It's a funnel, basically, as you kind of get the filtration higher and higher. And here you can have even things like kappa to determine the whether people agree or disagree in double or single coding. And if I can go in there, people actually can give the reason why they say yes or no, right? And because you need that for a meta-analysis, not only that you accepted it, but for the reason why. And finally, we get to the point where it gets really interesting. This is just an elaborate filtering system. We actually included some artificial intelligence and some machine learning. So when you actually go through title screening, you see AS review. If I turn that on, you have the AI, which basically using machine learning duplicates your style. So it's learning what criteria you're using. Intuitively, you don't have to teach it. It just learns from what it sees. And eventually, after about 200-300 you've gone through, it's now kind of duplicating your style about 93%. And so eventually, you're going to see how many you rejected continuously. This is an older one, so we did every one. But newer ones, basically, you only have to go through about 30% of them before the machine is kind of perfect and takes over. Okay, finally we get to data entry, right? We're filtering, machines helping to filter, recording reasons, including the reasons that say, well, yeah, this doesn't have any data, but it's really interesting or it makes a point. You can say whatever type of reason you want, right? Pull down menu. Then we get to the data. So the data, like this is a bigger one. And you can, if you want, you can import a full matrix. You can actually use a PDF reader.
We need a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And the PDF reader will optically scan your entire PDF, automatically find where the matrix is, scan it in, and put it in the matrix itself. So we're going to do a lot of data entry. Sometimes we have people kind of prepping it and using a CSV file if it's a funny one, if it goes over several pages, there's all these type of things that can happen. And then there's obviously pull down menus, right? For anything you want. If I want to make this a procrastination, right? I can choose whichever one I want. I can go to advanced to get more information, including the definition, citation, to make sure that's the one, right? Then I can do means, standard deviations. I can put everything in the same metric. So because in order to put something in the same metric, I need to know exactly when it starts, when it ends, whether it's aggregated, number of items, that sort of thing. It helps you put in the same. Otherwise, something might be 1 to 7 scale, something like 1 to 5 scale, they both say 4. But they're different, right? One's high and one's about middle. And you can have at the bottom as many moderator variables as you want for pulling down. So if you wanted to have to kind of specify exactly age or what the group is, or the population type, or how much education they have. Right? And then finally, because it's a database, I can go through and I'll just go here. Review. We run that. And that'll take a moment because now it's doing about 5,000 meta-analyses. So the database is all now. Having created it, we send it to an R server. So an R server can do anything R does, right? Which is everything. So it's just a question of what analytic package we've pre-written and put into there and how we're going to set it up. So right now it's taking the information that we got from approximately right now 1,100 articles with data. We got about probably about another 700-800 to go. So we're about, including all the other steps, we're about 80% of the way through this. And it's, by the way, it's the world's largest meta-analysis. So there, you get to see it. Guinness Books of World Record stuff, right? So this is every article and every variable ever done with procrastination. And then this year normally would take about a week or so to do, and we did it in seconds, as you see. And this is the number of articles, for example. We have 173 done with procrastination, self-efficacy. This is just a small sample. The entire data set, we have over 1,000, coming up to 2,000 measures. So, and constructs. And if I click on that, I can see, for example, what they all were. And if I want to exclude one because it's like this is 1 minus 0.76, all the rest are positive. And I'll say, yeah, these are outliers. And I'll get rid of a few of them because they're really wonky. And then I'll simply go at the bottom and say, okay. It'll recalculate that again in the moment. So, nice thing about building a program, it does everything you want it to do. Right? So you can go through and basically, really it is a very elaborate data entry form. So we're just putting data into a database. And in order that, you have a form before that, and to help you do that, because I think VAST did this massive meta-analysis, and you got a monograph for it for JAP. And I think it was the first monograph in 15 years. So it was the best of the best of the best type of stuff. And he did it on Excel.
Manually.
And it took him like how long to do?
Yeah, that was a massive. So yeah, once we get to coding data, the numbers, it will definitely help us a lot to help this automated process.
So we could go skip the screening thing, right? And just go right to the data entry. So if we kind of want to go through and say, look, it is a kind of a hassle when you are putting all the measurements in. Like, I mean, this goes on forever. Each one has to be done. Somebody has to type it in, make it ready. So if we have like what are you measuring? And we kind of like only want to do stuff which has multiple entries, right? So we want to have ones which has, at least 3 or 4 or 5 that people studied it with students at some level, like job satisfaction. And then we look for, then we're going to need ones for the other side eventually, so we can make a comparison. And so if it's job satisfaction and something else, right? So it's bivariate correlation. It's job satisfaction and extroversion. And some of it's done with student. There's going to be some people, of course, who've done it with employees. And sometimes we can get that from another meta-analysis. We don't have to do it here. So we can determine the scope first and exactly what we're targeting on. That's not a bad idea, right? That'll make things easier down the road. But eventually, we really should kind of move to this platform, because otherwise, if you're trying to do it all in Excel, yeah, it's going to be, we can do it. We have done it before. I just know how hard that is. And that's why I was motivated to create this platform. Otherwise, it is, you can do a lot of things old school, but it's going to take you 5 times the amount of time. So I would say, yeah, when we continue with the Excel spreadsheet way, and then kind of as part of the screening process.
Yeah. So yeah, that sounds very good. So that should, once we get to the data coding, definitely something that we need to use.
But you're right about that last example. Generally speaking, you can't do a lot with regression.
Yeah.
Regression is really a partial. You can convert it to a partial correlation. It's partial because all the other things in the regression. Yeah. And then they use some things like an econometrics, that to it's hard getting that one out. It's morning. I haven't even had my coffee yet, and I'm on vacation too. So there we go. The that's the front of the hotel back there, not my house. But so you'd want to actually make sure they have means and ideally correlations, so we can make kind of those type of 2 sides of the comparison. Yeah. And they separate out. They don't have students mix with employees, because then what can you do, right? I guess we could do a mix group, right? On percent of students and have it more like a continuous variable. Maybe we want to do that, right? Yep. But ideally it's student versus employees. And we simply take a look, because it's kind of interesting, because this shows you how much at the beginning of science we are, because we don't know boundary conditions. This is all this constraint, and like Jib saying, no, we're not dealing with any students. So why? It's based on guess. It's based on like out of nothing. They might be different. It's called a threat to validity, right? And if you have your Cook and Campbell book in quasi-experimental design, which was a Bible for every graduate student, they'll talk about it. But a threat to validity may or may not manifest, because that's what it is. It's not a realization, it's a threat. It may occur. So all of science here would be affected by this, because basically employees are hard to get and students are easy to get. And like some things like personality traits. Did any of our personality trait really change that much when we became graduated over sometimes that could be like 2 months difference. 2 months before you're a student, 2 months later you're an employee, right? Yep. No, we can't use you, we can use you, right? Yep. So just trying to kind of get a grips on this and actually kind of talk about when are students, inappropriate and when are they not. In my personal opinion, it depends upon the country, the socioeconomic status of the student. the selection criteria in the students, and of course the trait that you're examining. Okay.
So maybe what I suggest then, let's code a few papers together and then decide who will be doing which journals. So let me share my screen one more time, and let's take a look here at a few papers as examples. So this is what we would be doing, and so let's make sure that we all agree on the coding scheme. So I'll just go through a few papers, the one that we looked at, and then several other ones, and I'll show what needs to be done. So first, I would check one more time if it's really based on students or not. So I'm going through the list, and I see that it's a paper based on students. Then I would look at, so in this case, I would go to the paper title. So I would copy the paper title as we discussed and put it in, copy. So let me open this here. So I'm coding, it's GIBS, whatever the year that was, we will look at it in a second. That's the paper title. So I go back to the journal, it's 2008, 2008. And then paper ID, I would need to open the actual, I think it was this one here. So,
you have like an EndNote or Mendeley database? I
use it, but the students don't, or at least not always, and so it may, may create.
Because you could preload a tab with all the papers.
I guess, yeah, that would be nice, but for now it takes only a few seconds. I guess it would be cheaper sort of to do it the primitive way. Well, because the two graduate students we have here, master students, I think we'll lose them in less than a month. So I guess it would be more efficient to see what they can do before the semester is over. Yeah, but so for this one, we looked at it. It was organization fit, as you remember, right? So I would put it as organization fit as the general topic. What correlates with what? We can look either at the hypotheses or we can look at the correlations. And so if we look at the hypotheses, it may be a pretty fast way to do it, but again, requires some reading. So employee perceptions of the global capabilities in Iran will be positively related to perceived career opportunities. Like, this is complicated and so unique. I imagine we will not see more papers like that. So I'm not sure if we want to get into these very detailed hypotheses, but if we look at the correlation table, it seems to me that we can maybe record a few of these key variables. So we can say that we have, I'm not sure if we want to have topic 1, topic 2, but for what correlates with what, so it would be personal attributes and perceived organization fit. That's how we describe it, and that's enough information. And for the variables, I would put here, so career opportunity seems like a good topic. I would also add, that's why I'm not sure, do we record all of them or the most common ones, like job satisfaction, for example? That's the one that we definitely see more of. Company success, age, government. I'm not sure what's women's power. Maybe I'll record that. Maybe there will be something else. And maybe another theme here, by the way, so gender, I'll just put a gender as a topic, but they do talk a lot about based on the stuff. So maybe, I don't know, the role of gender in org fit perception. So it seems like based on what I've seen so far might be a topic. And so, Piers, do you think we want to record all of the variables or stop at this?
Well, then you might as well have gone to the other platform.
Yeah, so
right?
by that time we will probably get, But
I mean,
so satisfaction, acceptance of women, maybe I would add that one. It's seems like, we don't need age and gender because that will be in everyone, I assume.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I wouldn't have gone for all of them. I would just say,
Yeah, the key ones.
Then they get just the key ones, like, but I mean, yeah.
But yeah, I think I would stop here. So we got a general idea what the paper is about, and so we are done. So let's go to the next one. So
hey Voss, I just want to ask, why would you choose some of them and not all of those? Like, I am trying to develop my judgment as I watch.
You know what? That's a very good question. Maybe it would be sort of cheaper and simpler just to list all of them and not worry. For me, the reason is that some of these, I know that they're so unique that we probably will not see them ever.
Yeah, that's right.
But you know what, maybe instead of you trying to make that call, maybe let's just record all 13, and this way we got everything. So maybe let's record all, and I'm not sure if there's an easy way to copy this stuff. So it seems like maybe even, I don't know, if it's like this, maybe even do this, just, you know, paste the picture. And I'm not sure if it's the best. Yeah, that's not a very clean way to do it. But then maybe just start one by one, and we will get all of them in the paper. I would skip the sort of the basic variables such as company size, like we don't really need that. Maybe age and gender, so we know that we will have that. But all of the variables that are actually, you know, like not the sample description, but the actual variables, let's get all of them. Next one.
Well,
Yeah.
are you sure? I mean, is that going to be a time saving? That's my question.
Time saving meaning that record everything and just not too much.
Yeah, record everything. Yeah,
Let's record then everything that they have either in the correlation table like this, or if they have, it would be the same list in the regression results.
And you're dealing with like 1,000 of these.
There will be not so many papers. I mean, we'll probably have less than 1,000 total. And I think, you know, once you're here, this one is not recognized for copying, but most of them it would be copy paste. So it shouldn't be too difficult. So the problem is that, you know, some of them are repeated. So I guess once we have the correlation table, there is no point in going, you know, further. So
Yeah,
that gives us.
that's
so,
always going to be based on.
yes. So correlation would be, you know, nice, clean, full list. So next one. So as you know, as the first step, I would always recheck if it really contains a student sample. And I deliberately selected here a couple that were not, they were false positives. But this one, yes, participants were student recruitments. Very, very good. So then I would go and then record the information about the paper. So that's the title. So again, that's me, that's still Jibs. So ID, so that's the title. ID, I should have done it one by one. I think this would be the ID for this.
It really helps if you have two screens.
Yeah, and I do have, but you know, here we share only one, so it would be a little bit slower.
It'd be a little faster with you.
Yeah. Oops.
Can I ask a quick question too? Because there were also studies that we saw that had multiple samples. So they would have working individuals and students, and those were variables. So would we just?
That's a very, very good question. I specifically selected one that has multiple samples.
Okay.
So we'll get to that in a minute. So I specifically
selected. Now that's our best paper.
Yeah.
Because it's going to have the comparison baked into it.
Yes,
like these other ones are nice as students, but we need to find something else which does job satisfaction, right?
Mm-hmm. So for this one, let's see how we would record the topic. So comparative advertising and marketing where brands, okay, so something related to marketing. We can probably put that as a topic right away here, marketing.
You want to bring me
so, and then I'll look at the abstract. And so international differences in advertising practices, the effectiveness of comparative ad format, and message content. So something about what's in the ad and how people see it. And then I would go, that's a good one. So it gives you something. Experience with comparative advertisement, comparison format, content, skepticism, attributes towards the brand. So basically something, if the ad compares two things, does that lead to some sort of a difference in perception? So let's see if there is anything useful here. So not easy to see right away what the topic is, but if we don't want to spend more than a couple of minutes at this stage, we will see that it's something related to comparison format and advertisement and brand loyalty, brand novelty. And
you want to check first if it has a correlation.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. That's a very good point.
Yeah, so usually that's what I start with.
Sample, method, results. So do they have a correlation table?
Because you're going to get people, and this happens to us too.
It
and
doesn't seem like
it's just and then it just has regression, right? Or a ANOVA
in this case.
So if we could make it as part of the filtering process here, that you double check and make sure it has definitely has a correlation.
But we see right away. So it's marketing and it's brand perceptions. And then it has something to do with brand novelty and brand and comparison advertisement. So brand novelty comparison advertisement. It seems like there is really not much else we can get here. So there is market, model, but it's essentially content and format of the marketing. So maybe we'll add that for variables, content of the ad, and then format of the ad, and then how it affects brand perception. So that's essentially what the study does. We'll have more probably papers on marketing. We'll try to group them in some more intelligent way later, but this gives us a general theme so we kind of understand what the topic is about. So let's do a couple more. The interrelation between television viewing values and perceived well-being. Okay, that's easier. So we have right here, so how much people view TV, what kind of values they have, and how good they feel about their life. So right here, the topic is here, and it seems like it deals with materialism. So when people watch more TV, they develop more materialistic views, and the more they watch TV and develop materialistic views, the less they are happy in life. But there are differences by countries, apparently. And so again, I would check for students to be sure. I already did. And so the participants were college students, business students. They had a bunch of countries here. And so they looked at materialism, religiosity, perceived socioeconomic status. And then let's see if they have a correlation table. So they don't have the correlation table per se, but they have a list of variables here. So it gives us everything we need. So again, I would put my name, title, year, and then it seems like it would be a quantity. So it's for the topic TV effects, I guess, or TV and life satisfaction, maybe. I don't know. Let's put TV viewing for now, but it would be amount of TV and life satisfaction, something like that. And then for the variables, they have quantity of TV. Then they have religiosity, materialism. And I wish it did the spelling correct, but close enough. Material. Oh, it seems like we actually quoted that study before. So, but yeah, materialism, whatever, perceived realism, and socioeconomic status and satisfaction. Socioeconomic status and life satisfaction. Seems like that one was actually coded, so we have it. Now, I think this one is Jonathan Dawes, separate but not equal, the location determinants. This one I selected because it's an example of false positive. So see, when we look for students, it does mention students. So we use the number of students enrolled in secondary education in both public and private schools as indicators for education. So it looks like they talk about students, but then I look more for students. I don't see much here. They talk about some ratio of students to non-students and nothing else. And then I look at the title and I see the location determinants of discrete services offshoring. So it seems like they're talking about some corporate decisions. And then I go to the abstract and I see that the paper deals why firms offshore particular services to specific geographic locations. And I realized that the paper is about strategy and how companies decide basically where to open their subsidiaries. And so the presence of a lot of students in that location is one of the factors, but the students were not part of the study. So it's only one of the sort of considerations that the company makes, but the study is about companies, not about students, or not about people even. And so when you look at the sample, so when they say, where's the data? Data method. So in this, so somewhere here, yeah, dependent variable were drawn from the worldwide database of foreign direct investment projects. So essentially the companies, the firms were the study subjects, not people who are students. So this one is a false positive. And so I would go to that study and change the classification to 0. So which one is Jonathan Daw? Let's see if I can find it right away. So that's the paper, right? Yeah, that's the paper. And so I would just simply put it to a minus because we now know that this paper does not contain the data that we need. So it does mention students. It's one of the variables, but it's tricky And so for that reason, it sort of looks like, like a good paper, but in reality, it's not. So now next one. So let me just make sure that so we did the perception of well-being. Yes. So now this one, beyond country image favorability. So that's one of our close friends, Peter Magnuson. So again, many of you know him. So how brand positioning by a country personality stereotypes enhances brand evaluations. This one is also tricky. Look at this one. That's a very interesting study. That's the one that has both samples. So you start looking for student. So they mention a bunch of studies that were done before, but not this one. And then you see something related to students. But if I do, actually, I need to use student, the word student, because you will see how tricky this one is. So they mention student, 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 but then they say for study one, we recruited non-student participants. So I was disappointed because it does contain the word student, but it's not what we need. But I kept looking at it. And so I see again, 150 non-student participants. Okay, then again, so, but I'm suspicious. Why do they say specifically non-student? Like, why does it matter? Maybe they use students later. And so I keep scrolling, and then again, 144 non-student participants. And then another 150 non-student participants. So that's strange. But then I get to study two, and that's where they say we also recruited 160 student participants. So great, in study two, they actually did use students. So great, so that's a suitable study. And then I look at the description, and they said that brands were evaluated more favorably when the brand is positioned in a manner that is congruent with the brand's country home country personality stereotype. And when brand was positioned as incongruent. So right here, then I know what the study was about. So I describe, jibs, year, but then so it would be again marketing. I would put marketing, and what correlates with what. So that's country image and brand perception essentially. And again, so I know this topic, so that's easy for me. Those of you who haven't done anything in this area, so the term may not be as easy, but as long as you describe in your own words what's going on there, that's good enough. We can go to the paper itself and maybe scroll down and see what exactly they, like when we look at some of the outcome variables. So warm positioning, compelled positioning. So I don't know what those are. We can, I'm not sure if we need to get into those details, but we know that it's how the perception of the country essentially affects the perception of the brand, and if the advertisement has that congruence in the ad. So maybe I would also add something here. So country image and brand perception, and maybe the next one would be ad or country image or ad and country image congruence. So something like that. So we will later, again, if we see that we have enough papers on marketing, we will see if there are any common topics. But I think with this information, for me, that's enough to know that it's about marketing. It has something with the brands. And so it was some sort of, ad versus country image congruence. So, and for the variables, I'm not sure how easy it would be to record what the actual variables were in a study like this. We sort of listed them all, but I don't see any correlation tables here. And I'm not sure if we want to, it would be nice to maybe extract some of these variables. Oh yeah, so they have a list of table 2. So they have the country, they have the positioning, so position and competent, warm, intellectual. So we might want to include that just so that we have, so it would be a brand positioning, and maybe even add what types they used. And I'm not sure if there's anything else here. Country positioning, cultural authenticity, whatever that is. I'm not sure if I want to, maybe let's record it. So just takes a second and you will need it at some point. But I don't see, it seems like it's repeated same thing all the time. Oh, there is also animosity, whatever that is. So let's include that as well, just so that we have the information. One more thing, by the way, I'm not sure if I want to do it again. Pierce, maybe you tell me. It may not be a bad idea to copy and paste the whole abstract so that we don't need to answer the paper. Do you think that's a good idea? Like, I don't know if we have, like, for example, I don't know, abstract. And so if we put the abstracts here, so it would be the whole thing. And so I would then change the format so it's not wrapped text so that it's compact. But so this way it would be easy to see the abstract so that we can better understand what was the topic without opening the paper. Maybe let's add the abstract. What do you think? I mean, is it too much or is it a good idea?
I think it's too much. I think
Maybe-
we'll get the apps. I don't think that's going to help filtering. We're going to get it later. It would.
That's fine,
it
maybe,
would-
yeah. Or maybe, if it's something that you can copy like this, like, 2 seconds, let's do it. But if it's, image, no need to do the text recognition. So
I do have one question though.
Mhm.
Okay, the metabus, right? My previous
Yeah.
incarnation. We have when that data got coded, it got coded by whether the people were general employees, subordinates, managers, or students.
you think
or
we can
in-
extract something from there?
Well, it has 1 million research findings, right?
Maybe.
So you simply kind of go through and do once with employees, do once with students, and then you have 2 rather elaborate kind of databases, right?
That's a very good
based-
idea. So if it's something that you can extract, I think that would also help us. I wonder how many of these papers are already there. Is it possible that they are? Can we sort them by journal?
Yeah, some of them might already be there by journal, right? So you can sort by journal. It's not really well organized. If you can get into, the the Metabus database, like Frank's version? I have the
No,
Excel
I don't
file.
think I can. Yeah.
but your students could.
Well, I guess, maybe it's better if MetaHub, again, that's a whole new database. So maybe if you and I manage that, because we're a little bit more familiar with it. So whereas the students can do this sort of checking for quality. By the way, I don't
Yeah.
hear anything from the students. You guys are probably confused completely, right? Or is it making sense to you? Honestly.
I'll speak up. So it makes a bit of sense to me. I know that you make these judgment calls very quickly going through the paper. So
Yeah.
I know I'll probably record a lot of things that are extraneous just because I don't want to miss it. And I'm still trying to figure out the difference between, I like the system that Piers showed us. So I'm not sure, I just know that we'll be doing a lot of redundant things, right? So we'll do things in the Excel spreadsheet that will help qualify papers that we put in the database system in the future. And I'm fine with learning and doing something that's, going to be replicated in the future, maybe just like extracted and put into that system. But that's where I'm just trying to figure out like what's the difference between what we're doing and what's in the MetaHub, if that's the name of it.
My
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, MetaHub, that's the quantitative part. So because at some point we will need to start analyzing the numbers. And so when we say correlations, we'll actually need the actual correlation coefficient. We'll need the reliability, we'll need the means and averages. So we'll need the actual data. And so that's where we'll need to use MetaHub. But my understanding is that most of these papers that we have now identified, they are unique in a sense that there are not 3, 4, 5 or more papers on the same topic. And if so, we will only be able to mention them sort of as a study, but we will not subject them to any meta-analytic sort of analysis. And so that's why the logic is that maybe for now, let's see the topics and identify the ones that we will actually be able to quantitatively.
As a pre-screen and
Yeah.
then.
So that's almost like another level of screening rather than coding per se.
Yeah, but you're right. Some of them will be in Hub Meta.
Mhm.
And because we imported everything from Metabus into there. So it's already in our library. So what we now simply have to do is, double check it and make sure it's in the right format. If not, I'll have to get Amir to go in and improve the extraction. Who's my programmer. And so we can start. What this might be doing is if we already have that and have the articles identified with the students, then we're just adding to the pile like this. So we start with that with a base, and maybe we're already halfway through, right? Because we dealt with a lot of these ones already. So we're just looking for ones that we've missed or that weren't coded or weren't in the journal list that comprised of Metabus.
Well, the good
So
thing
by
is
the way,
that-
Metabus is an early iteration I did with Frank Bosco and Krista Ugerslev.
Yeah.
And then after 5 years, we wanted to go different direction. The band broke up. And I went towards Hub Meta, and I said, yeah, you guys maintain Metabus if that pleases you.
well, the good-
And I got a copy of the data. And so now Metabus kind of is something stuck in 2017 because they won't write grants and they won't do the work, but they certainly do like to get the credit. So while my vision continued on, right? So we have the data and we can still make good use of it. So why don't maybe I should slow down.
if you can take a look maybe at that part. So the good
Yeah.
news is that in the current database, we have only a few hundred papers that actually were based on students. So it will be less than 1,000.
Yeah.
And so my logic here is that sort of the brute force approach that we just discussed. So basically looking at each paper and recording what we have. We know that it's doable in a couple of weeks, probably even less, because now it's not that many papers. And so at least at this stage, it's predictable, it's easy, and no need to learn any new tools. And we do have still a few hours left in this semester from our graduate students. And so my logic was that let's just rely on the resource, do it the simplest way possible.
Yeah.
Then have it all done. And I'm actually now trying to see how many papers we have. I think it's actually less than that because we have, if you give me one more second, so it may be like only like 200 papers. It's really not that many. So once we have that number, so it shouldn't take that much time. And so this quick screening and recording the papers that contain the usable data, that's all we need at this time. And
But
so
I would really strongly suggest, at least because HubMeta still has a nice interface, and I think you can sort by student and employee status.
yes,
And
yeah.
but
Now, the question is,
Frank likes to watch IP addresses,
Mhm.
and he'll block any ones that he associates with me.
now,
But for Karen, for example, Karen can probably go in, request accept there, and just start looking for anything that has gets an idea of what's available, and then we could try and replicate it in ours because it's not a bad interface. It's based on ours, Shiny, and it has some reasonable filters. It's not bad work. It's just.
So I think I cleaned up everything. So let me just see here a couple more things. So as far as how many papers we have. So it seems to me, let me share my screen and I'll show you how many we have. So, but it may be actually many fewer than we thought or than I thought. So if I go to, let me see, there's an easy way for me to properties. 841, but 841, I think this includes many minuses. So it would be about 500 papers total that we need to check in this manner. So I think that's it seems like, yeah, so that's yes and no's. Yeah, it should be about 800 papers from what I see. So there are some minuses here, but more or less that's all pluses or questionable ones. So I don't know, it seems to me like it's a doable task just to do it quickly, record just like what we did in the example here. And then we will know what topics we deal with. Some of them, I mean, most of them will be unique. We probably will not be able to do much with them. But I think we'll probably feel like there will be more on marketing. There will be probably more on some other topics. And so, so then maybe just in the interest of time, if you can trust me with sort of distributing the workload more or less evenly, just the only question I have for everyone. So what's your availability in the coming weeks? So Susanna, I know it's 18 hours a week that she basically owes me. I'm not sure about others. Will you guys be able to do much in the coming weeks or not, basically by the end of the semester?
I'll sit down with AB and we'll talk about her hours because she's been working quite a bit with me. So I want to make sure she's not overextended, but I'm very hopeful that she'll also be with us next semester. So, let's just fingers crossed there, but I'll get back with you, Voss, on what hours we can commit.
Let me let me select journals with, let's say 50 to 100 papers each, and then maybe you start assigning them. So some to Susanna, some to AB. Karen and Christy, will you be able to do any coding in the coming weeks before the semester is over? How is your timing and final papers and whatever else you need to do?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm pretty bogged down right now because I'm working on another paper and I'm also in a class that has a paper due. But with that being said, I still want to help, as much as I can. So I'm willing to take some of this on, but if other people have more capacity, I probably ask for a little bit less right now.
Let's do the following. So let me assign the papers primarily to AB and Susanna for the next few weeks. And then whatever they can complete until the semester is over and they go on a break, we will see how much is done. And then the rest of us will work over the break, because for us, actually, the break is a better time to work, whereas they officially are not required to do any work once it's the break. So therefore, Karen and Christy, you focus on finishing the semester and whatever other things you need to do, teaching and things. And AB and Susanna, let's try to do as many as we can.
Sure,
in
Professor.
the next
Yeah, I
few
can do
weeks.
that. Yeah.
And then we will reevaluate where we stand at, basically end of November or first days of December, and then figure out the plan for the.
And I'll try and get as much data extracted from the Metabus and as well, so it's when they come together smoothly.
Yeah, and I personally am interested actually in going through the meta-analytic papers. We don't have that many of them, and they are a little bit more complicated. So I think it might be better if I work with those and code them. But then, I'll follow up with an email within the next couple of hours, and then basically assign the first batch to AB and Susanna. And as before, so Susanna knows that AB, so I'll also include my contacts. So as you start working on this, if any questions arise, just call me. So usually it's like, takes a few seconds. And so we talk, it's clear, you can carry on. And usually once we have this, initial 1 or 2 meetings, usually it becomes more or less clear. But there will be questions in the beginning. And so if you send me a question by email, not only by the time I reply, you have lost your momentum, but it also may cost us a few days. So it's almost easier, just call me. I'll quickly answer the question, you carry on, and I get back to my task. So it shouldn't be a problem. So wait for the email. I guess the general sort of theme and purpose and intent are clear, and then we'll work on the details as we move along.
Voss, are you going to code the meta-analysis papers before break or after?
Yeah, I'll try to start working on that as soon as I can.
I'm going to say to you, when you do it, if you want to Zoom with me, I will sit quietly.
Maybe,
I just want to observe because that will help me.
Let me
be boring, but
figure out
how it goes.
Yeah, and that one is a little bit more complicated because it's but yes, we'll get to those, and yes, I can invite you so that we can do it together. So
okay, thanks.
All right. Okay, well, I'll be sending an email with sort of written instructions, and then we'll go from there. So let's see how much we can complete. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.